So we're continuing in our Uncommon series, and this month we're talking about uncommon generosity. And today is Veterans Day, and so we're remembering those that have been generous in their service of this country. And I can think of no greater act of generosity than laying down your life to serve others, to protect the freedom that we have. And so I'm here with Jeff Winter. Jeff and his wife Carol have been a part of our church for about 8 years, and recently I had a chance to have breakfast with Jeff and just hear some of the stories of the time that he served. And so I asked him if he'd be willing to come and share some of that with us today on such a special day. So Jeff, when and where did you serve?
I served I went over to Vietnam in February of 1970. I was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division, which 101st was the last full division that served in Vietnam.
And the 101st is probably the most famous, the 101st Airborne, the most famous division in all of military. And so that's pretty amazing that you're able to be a part of that. I'm sorry to interrupt. Continue on. And
so I was assigned to Camp Evans, which was the farthest camp that in Vietnam, or South Vietnam at the time, right up by the demilitarized zone in Quang Tri province. So most of our fighting was done around the A Shau Valley and the Ho Chi Minh Trail out there.
And you saw some real difficult circumstances.
Yes.
When you were there. And I want to ask you, I'm going to ask you to share some memorable moments. But first, I want you to share maybe a funny moment. You shared this with me when we had breakfast about the four guys you were close to, and one of the guys that jumped out and hid in a ditch. Do you remember that story?
Yeah.
Can you tell us that?
Ernie.
Ernie.
Ernie, we called him T-Bones because he broke his arm one day over there, and that was another story. But we were fortunate. We would be out in the field for sometimes 2 to 3 months. So we came into the rear one time, and actually it was just three of us, Jay and Ernie and I. And we decided that night that we were going to go out to the bunker to harass some of the guys that were on guard duty. So we stole the Jeep, went out and had the night lights on, and we're cruising around and heading out there, and all of a sudden I looked up, and out of Quang Tri I could see a rocket coming, and I yelled to Jay, "Rocket," and Ernie was sitting in the back, and we're flying along, the rocket flies over, goes off, and I look in the back seat, and I said, "Jay, where's Ernie?" He said, "I don't know." So we stopped, I had to turn around, and there's Ernie laying alongside the road. We had to stop and pick him up. He got scared and jumped out when the rocket went off. So we, said, "Ernie, come on."
So he thought the safest thing to do would be to get out of the Jeep that's driving away.
Yeah. So he jumped out and rolled in the ditch. So we had to pick Ernie up. We had a few laughs and took off again.
I can't even imagine a rocket's coming. Like, let's drive away. I mean, that seems like such a.
Yeah, but that was Ernie. Ernie. Another time with Ernie, it was always kind of Ernie that. Ernie and I had to go way out. There was a rock way out on the end of the hill, and we had to go out, the two of us, and we're out there, and I look up on Hill 802. I could see a mortar coming, and I yelled to Ernie, "Mortar, get down." And so I laid down behind the rock. The mortar goes off, and I said, "Where's Ernie?" And they called me Chunks. He says, "Chunks, I'm over here." I said, "Ernie, that's the wrong side. That's where it's coming from." So Ernie survived and made it through. But we don't know how.
They called you Chunks? Hold on now. Why'd they call you Chunks?
Well, I don't know. I guess being so short, and
that's pretty fun.
So
you might get called that today, I think, when you leave service. So that's pretty amazing, And by the way, thank you. And I said that to you before we had breakfast, but thank you for not only serving, but for being willing to share that with us. And so many times people, I've had experiences like you had, and we don't ever really get to benefit from them. And I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to do that. I know there's others in our church that have also served and have similar stories, or they have their own stories. What would be one of the more memorable things that you take away from that time? Something that just truly impacted you that you will never forget?
Well, it happened in March. I'd been over there like a month, and Ernie and I were out on Firebase Marine. We got our orders to get on the next helicopter. They were going to open up Ripcord at that time.
And what does Ripcord mean?
Ripcord was a fire support base. It was over there that ended up becoming the 5th largest battle of the whole Vietnam campaign when it was all said and done. And so this was March. It was monsoon season. And the helicopter was coming in, and usually with the helicopters, when they came in, 3 people jumped in on one side, 3 on the other side, and you dangle with your legs out so you could jump out when you landed. And over there, we always carried, 100 to 125 pound rucksack on our back, so you jump in. And as the helicopter's coming down, it was, at the time you didn't know it, but now as I look back, it was the Lord, because I just heard this distinct voice said, don't get on this helicopter. So as the helicopter came down, I yelled at Ernie, and I said, and Ernie was in charge, and I said, Ernie, don't get on. And so Ernie backed off, the helicopter took off, and Ernie says, Chunks, why weren't we supposed to get on that helicopter? What are we going to do? And about that time, the helicopter was maybe 1,500 to 2,000 yards out as it blew up, and everybody was on there was killed. And I said, Ernie, that's, and at that time, although I was saved, I wasn't walking with the Lord and seeing the Lord, but I guess I just leave it to my mother praying for me. And, and that's something that now I think of often, that, although there were other instances, that was one where it was just, that voice was so distinct to me that it was like you didn't even question it. You just yelled at Ernie and backed off. So,
So you just heard a voice, don't get on it.
Don't get on. And
Ernie trusted you enough that when you said not to, he didn't.
Backed off and didn't. And
wow.
So it was, that's something I guess that has kind of impacted me all my life to, like I say, I thank my mother for praying for me every day. I learned so much, I think, about, leadership and doing things and working together as a team. It's helped me so much in my job and life. And I look at, when I came back, and I guess I probably never identified and said I had any post-traumatic stress syndrome, but I think really I did. I came back in 1970, and 2 days after I got home, I just about killed one of my brothers. He came walking up when I was laying down and moved on. But it was in, March of 1979 when, basically I was on the road, and I said, I'm either gonna run the car off the road and take my life, or I'm going to church and give my heart to the Lord, or turn it fully over to the Lord, because basically I'd given my heart to the Lord in 5th grade at a Bible camp. But I went into the church, and at that time I was smoking 3 to 4 packs of cigarettes, chewing tobacco, and drinking straight scotch. And I walked into the church, and Pastor Lester and his wife Esther took me in, and I put everything in God's hands. And they every week I met with them, and it was just.
I want to ask you a question and respond to me as if you're responding to one of your grandkids that may see this years from now. What would be one thing that you would want your grandkids to know about your service, and to know that you maybe learned from that or experienced from that if there's one thing you could make sure your grandkids knew, what would it be?
Well, of course, to really trust the Lord in all this, even though, like I say, I wasn't, but, to learn how you work together with each other, to, form a bond, like I say, with JFK and Jay and T-Bones and that. I mean, we had a unity and a bond, and to pick your friends and get good, solid, strong friends, and ones that you can trust and rely on, because we went through all kinds of things, but yet we really had some great times of making ourselves laugh and doing things. And we often said, boy, if we were back home, if we did this, they'd probably lock us up, but you did it to laugh and keep yourself going. So find good friends and
what I would say to your grandkids is to take time to hear the stories of people like you. And I would also like to say to them, make sure we're grateful for the generation before us that has laid their life down in ways that we know and in ways that we don't know. And you served at a time when people in our country were not very grateful for our military. And I think you experienced that firsthand when you came back from Vietnam. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, when I came in, it happened to be New Year's Eve. When I got discharged and headed to the Seattle-Tacoma airport, when I walked in there, nobody would talk to me or nothing. And of course, I walked into the bar and nobody would talk to me. There was 2 older ladies there that had come down from Vancouver, British Columbia to the Seattle-Tacoma airport, so they were the only ones. They sat and talked to me for the whole evening, until I was time. It was like 1 o'clock when I caught my flight back to Minneapolis. And
so it's New Year's Eve. You've been serving your country in Vietnam. You come back to the States, and no one would speak to you.
Right.
And the only people that did speak to you were 2 people from Canada who came and sat down just to talk with you and hear about your experiences. And share those last hours of that year.
Right.
Yeah, and so what I would want to say is to my generation, generations after me, to your grandkids, is we should never take for granted the service of those, even in times of when decisions may be made that we don't understand or disagree with, to never take for granted or be unappreciative of that service. And that's what today is all about in Veterans Day. And like I said at the beginning, we're in this series on uncommon generosity, and I can think of no greater act of generosity than sacrificing for the freedom of others, to protect the freedom of others, to serve your country. And so I just want to say, on behalf of all of us, thank you.
It's exciting now as I travel a lot to see the veterans coming back from Iraq and Iran, you're getting cheered and clapped for on the plane.
Yeah.
Because that didn't happen. But I want to say to all you Vietnam veterans that are out there, just welcome home. Because you never got welcomed home.
Hold on, let's just do that one again. So, to all of you that served in Vietnam, we want to say to you, Vietnam veterans that never got a welcome home, and thank you. Welcome home.
Welcome home, and thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.